Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of the hour. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he raises the Jimmy Lai case and Uyghur rights with President Xi Jinping. He also says talks make progress on trade, travel and resetting UK-China relations. Iran says its armed forces are ready to respond immediately to any US strike. The warning comes as President Trump reiterates military threats and US forces deploy to the region. EU foreign ministers are expected to list Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group. The move follows a deadly crackdown on protests, EU's top diplomat says. The two US federal agents involved in the fatal shooting of Alex Pretty in Minneapolis have been placed on administrative leave. The move follows national outrage over the death and comes as protests and scrutiny of federal enforcement intensifies. Israel's parliament gives initial approval to the 2026 state budget, averting an immediate early election. The spending plan still faces a tough final vote amid coalition divisions. Dozens are killed after the RSF drones hit the town of Dilling in South Kordofan in Sudan. The strikes target military positions and a central market. China executes 11 people linked to Myanmar-based scam gangs, state media has said. Beijing says the move targets key figures in cross-border cybercrime. A plane crash in northeast Colombia kills all 15 on board, including a local lawmaker. The aircraft loses contact minutes after departing Calcutta for a short flight to Okana. Those are the headlines for the hour, but we start in Europe, and the EU is set to blacklist Iran's Revolutionary Guards and place them on the EU's terrorist list following the deadly crackdown on mass protests in the country. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas emphasised that those who act like terrorists should be treated as such regardless of their position. This decision will align with the IRGC with groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Meanwhile, 21 Iranian officials and entities, including Iran's interior minister, will face sanctions such as visa bans and asset freezes. However, Kallas reassured that diplomatic channels with Iran will remain open. Furthermore, this decision comes after shifts in France and Italy's stance, with both countries supporting the designation. The EU has already imposed sanctions on hundreds of Iranian officials for human rights abuses and support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Joining us now to discuss this is Saul Sadka, a political commentator joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Saul. It's always a pleasure to speak to you here on the broadcast. The EU is preparing to put Iran's Revolutionary Guards on its terrorist list, despite it, of course, supporting directly the regime of Iran. Is this a symbolic move or a fundamental escalation in how Europe treats the Iranian state itself?
It is actually a fundamental change. It's unquestionable, of course, that the IRGC for over 40 years has been responsible for terrorism even within the EU borders, including in London and other places and around the world, in Buenos Aires, there's no question. However, governments have, in general, been reluctant to put our IRGC on the terrorist list because they are, after all, the government of a sovereign nation with 19 million population. It's quite complicated. It means that, in theory, even diplomats from Iran, if they are in European Union, in theory, they could be guilty of crimes. They could be war criminals. Just in the last couple of weeks, the list of potential war criminals who are members of the IRGC has risen to thousands, if not tens of thousands. It's really extraordinary. The embarrassment for the EU is that groups, pro-West groups, Jewish groups, have been trying to persuade the European Union to prescribe the IRGC for 20 or 30 years, and they have always refused. In the UK, it's still refusing, even though there is evidence that the IRGC are behind terrorist attacks on British soil and attacks on British citizens on British soil. They have been refusing, and all these countries are being now shamed into doing so simply by the obvious bloodthirsty nature of the regime. It wasn't enough, the terrorism wasn't enough against their own citizens, but now they are having to do it. But it could well be that by the time this prescription is passed into law, the IRGC will no longer be a thing. That's entirely possible, which would be in great disgrace to the upper echelons of the European Union.
And so this terror designation allows freezes, the criminalization of support, and expanded law enforcement powers. What actually changes on the ground, however, once the IRGC is formally listed?
I don't know the details of the exact way that the prescription works within the EU. I can tell you more about the UK, but certainly the main thing initially is, at least, it's going to be a significant burden on anyone who is a member of the IRGC to travel into the European Union. They would risk arrest. And as you mentioned, protests in support of the Iranian regime would technically become illegal if the IRGC is designated a terror entity. Although, as we have seen, those laws around Europe are imposed very rarely, and we have seen many protests in support of designated terrorist organizations with very few arrests. But the main thing here is really the primary level is symbolic. It's an act of support. So while America looks to be building up a military force against the IRGC in the Middle East, the Europeans aren't doing that. But this perhaps is their way of helping to support the protesters, to give them succor as they face their oppressors.
And of course, Saul, Iran has warned that such a move would trigger retaliation. Looking at the broader perspective, of course, if the United States, of course, who currently has its what Donald Trump calls an armada heading towards the Gulf of Arabia. Do you think the United States and, of course, regional allies are ready for escalation if that was if those actions were to go through? The United States striking Iran, that is.
The situation there is very febrile at the moment. The build-up in the Indian Ocean is extremely intense. But it's not just that. It's not just the build-up of the American troops there. It's that the entire place is being put on guard. And I've no doubt that the Americans and the Israelis and other states in the region, some of whom are actually pretending that they're not involved, are currently building up a very strong and updated target list to ensure that the Iranian regime can be denuded as much as possible, as fast as possible, with a shock and awe strategy if required. The Iranian regime have rejected Trump's offer for mediation. They've rejected an offer that was put on the table a few days ago to disarm from most of their missile stockpiles, stop supporting their proxies, and hand over the remaining nuclear material that is believed to be under the ruins of the Fordo plant. But they have rejected that. And my guess is, from reading the statements being put out right now by Iranian regime spokesmen, which are very bellicose and also sort of darkly miserable, that they realize that it's too late for them and their regime is on their last legs. Some of them will be trying to escape and make deals, and other ones who are perhaps more religious will go down with the ship. After all, the IRGC is based on a version of Islam that is fundamentally millenarian. They seek the end of the world, they seek cataclysm, and they might be relishing this on some personal religious level. We'll see very soon.
Sol Sadka, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, it is always a pleasure to speak to you. We now move on to our next story. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer met Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing today, vowing to strengthen ties between their countries. Starmer said the UK and China need a long-term, consistent and comprehensive strategic partnership, highlighting opportunities for collaboration while maintaining dialogue on disagreements. Xi Jinping emphasised the need to strengthen cooperation to navigate complex global challenges, calling for closer dialogue between two permanent UN Security Council members. Both leaders stressed the importance of building a more sophisticated relationship to address global and economic issues together. Let's in fact listen into what both the leaders had to say.
I've long been clear that the UK and China need a long-term, consistent and comprehensive strategic partnership. That's what we discussed when we met in Rio in the G20. We are G20 economies. We're fellow members of the United Nations Security Council, and our trading relationships support hundreds of thousands of jobs in each other's countries and have gone on for a very, very long history. I think that working together on issues like climate change, global stability, during challenging times for the world is precisely what we should be doing as we build this relationship in the way that I've described. So thank you again.
Joining us now is Kriti Mehta. She is a news editor, joining us live from the newsroom now. Kriti's going to give us more details on this meeting between the United Kingdom and China. What more can you tell us about this meeting in Beijing, Kriti?
Right. Tom, this of course was a very anticipated meeting and a crucial one, given that Starmer is turning towards China at a time when Trump is really giving the European Union a very tough time, and the transatlantic alliance is seeing a rift. Amidst this, Starmer's visit to China is crucial, and as far as the progress in this meeting is made, let me give you some more pointers. Now, whiskey tariffs and visa-free travel have seen some progress during Starmer's visit to China. Starmer has also called for a more sophisticated relationship with China. There are other issues that are resolved, including that of security. Remember, Tom, and for our viewers, security has been a crucial concern, as we saw over the issue of the Chinese embassy in London that finally got get through a go ahead. So those are the key details that are coming out as of now, but we are tracking more updates as and when they come. We will be updating our viewers with those.
Yes, Kriti, thank you very much for giving us that insight there on the ongoing meeting between Xi Jinping and Keir Starmer. Of course, here on NewsX World, we'll continue to cover that and follow it as it develops over the next 4 days. We now move on and over to Southeast Asia, and Thailand's Foreign Minister Shishachak Phumthephetchabul has said that he hopes Myanmar's election would be the start of a transition that could ultimately lead to a sustainable peace in the civil war-torn country. Shishachak added that he hoped the polls, which rights groups have widely described as a sham, could be a precursor to sustainable peace. Shishachak has stated that it's not perfect, the election, but Thailand hopes that it will be the start of transition. This comes as Myanmar's pro-military party declared victory in the junta-run elections, which is widely labelled as a sham. This follows, of course, Myanmar's elections, which the likes of the United Nations, Amnesty International and other human rights organisations have raised their concerns over the legitimacy of Myanmar's elections. Of course, we're now joined by Professor A.K. Pasha, the Director of the Gulf Studies Programme at JNU. They're joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Thailand's statements here. Of course, a lot of the human rights organisations, including that of the United Nations, Amnesty International and others, they've called Myanmar's election here illegitimate. Thailand's statements, hoping that these elections will lead to stability. Is that appeasing Myanmar's ruling military junta with these statements? Of course, Thailand, a prominent member of ASEAN, an organisation that Myanmar is eager to be recognised by once again.
Yes, I think there is this optimism expressed by the Thai foreign minister because not only Thailand but all the members of the ASEAN have become tired of this civil war raging since the military took over in 2021, overthrowing the elected civilian government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February 2021. So these elections, although this was the third round, which was held on Sunday, of the three-stage general election, almost capping a nearly month-long process that has already ensured the country's military rulers and their allies will command a parliamentary majority. Because the army-backed Solidarity and Development Party, or the USDP, has already secured most of the seats contested in the first two rounds of voting. 25% of the seats, moreover, in both the houses of national parliament are reserved for the military. So thereby guaranteeing it and its allies control of the legislature. So the senior general Min Aung, who heads the current military government, is widely expected to become the new president when the new parliament meets. Moreover, you see the army takeover triggered widespread opposition that dragged Myanmar into a civil war. And security concerns by the fighting meant voting was not held in more than 1/5 of the country's 330 townships. Another reason the process is seen as neither free nor fair. And ASEAN ministers did not send observers and they have refused to certify the elections, citing concerns over lack of inclusion and free participation. So in the background of this, Thailand's foreign minister, which is a neighbor of Myanmar, and which has seen turmoil flowing from Myanmar into its territory, hoping that things would improve. Although he said it's not a perfect election, but we hope that it will start the process of transition. So in that way, the transition process, we have to see how the military government, addresses the several challenges which the country faces. Because this internal rebellion in all parts of Myanmar has sapped its energy, and the military is bogged down in multiple conflicts in north, bordering China, and then the Rohingyas, and in the east also. So this dialogue and reconciliation and the peace process, many people in ASEAN and all over the world, including India, hope that this will lead to sustainable peace, which Myanmar had seen during the civilian government for quite some time. So this is very disturbing trend that the elections were skewed.
Yeah, indeed. Professor Pasha, do stay with us as we move on to our next story and we turn to the Caribbean Sea. And the United States is handing over a Venezuela-linked oil tanker that it seized earlier this month, according to US officials. The vessel, identified as the Panama-flagged supertanker, the MT Sophia, was interdicted on January the 7th while carrying oil by the US Coast Guard and military forces. At the same time, the Sophia was described as a sanctioned and stateless vessel belonging to Venezuela's so-called shadow fleet. US authorities have seized 7 tankers linked to Venezuelan oil exporters since late last year as part of a broader enforcement campaign. Officials did not say why the Sophia was being returned, and it was not clear whether the ship still had oil on board. Professor Pasha joins us once again. What does the handover of this signal in terms of that relationship between the United States and Venezuela at the moment?
You see, this return of the tanker, which legitimately belongs to Venezuelan government, is a welcome move because they are trying to normalize relations after the illegal capture of Maduro and whisking him away to New York and holding him in detention, which was not authorized by any international body, a clear violation of the UN Charter and the sovereignty of Venezuela. Likewise, these tankers were carrying Venezuela oil to international consumers, and America is behaving in a rather unusual manner, trying to be enforcer of the sanctions they have imposed. It has no legitimacy in the UN resolution or any other international body, multilateral body. So the abduction and now the release of the tanker shows that to some extent the new leaders in Venezuela are willing to cooperate, and America also wants to work with them and normalize relations because they need Venezuelan oil, because many of the refineries in the Gulf of Mexico, in Houston, in Corpus Christi, and other areas, they rely on heavy crude from Venezuela. So they want to have a continuous flow of oil so that the southern coast, southern area of the United States doesn't get deprived of the Venezuelan oil, which because of American actions was deprived for too long. And oil prices are also expected to decline in the background of inflation and worries by Americans that this tariff war and all the war-like situation created by Trump, is leading to tension, anxiety, and turmoil, which the Americans are not used to. So in that way, this shows there is some path for reconciliation, dialogue, and softening of the American approach as far as Venezuela is concerned.
Professor Pasha, thank you very much for joining us here on the broadcast. It's a pleasure to get your insight on these issues. We finish this hour with news from the tech world, and Tesla has announced a $2 billion investment in CEO Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company xAI, while also confirming that production plans for its highly anticipated Cybercab robotaxi are on track for this year. This move aligns with Musk's vision to pivot Tesla from an electric vehicle maker to a major player in the AI industry, a shift that supports the company's massive $1.5 trillion valuation. However, reassuring investors on production plans is crucial, as Tesla has faced challenges meeting some of Musk's earlier promises. As part of Musk's ambitious plans, Tesla is also focusing on building humanoid robots, semi-trucks, and the roadster sports cars. Tesla is entering what analysts describe as a transition phase, where the company will rely on potential revenue from its self-driving software and robotaxi business before its auto sales recover. Taiwan's Marine Corps and its Haifeng Brigade, a land-based anti-ship missile unit, have conducted a series of military exercises incorporating attack and reconnaissance drones. This is part of their annual combat readiness drill. timed strategically ahead of the Lunar New Year. The exercises are designed to ensure the military is prepared for potential threats and to demonstrate Taiwan's capabilities in defending its territory. Meanwhile, Hai Feng Brigade's captain and section leader have reacted. Let's listen into what they had to say.
从目标的监侦、锁定、追踪，然后完成我们所谓的战斗识别、精确识别之后，最后导引飞弹实施精准攻击。当然，这个时候还没结束，精准攻击完毕后，我们还要实施所谓的 BDA， 也就是战场评估。这个时候，监侦型无人机的任务才算告一段落。
面对中共持续灰色地带袭扰，我们全体官兵将持续强化勤监侦、机动部署与临机应处的能力，落实平战一体。而我亦将持续带领区队的弟兄姊妹稳定成长，全力以赴坚守岗位，为守护海疆安全与确保战备任务圆满完成，持续奉献心力。
Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.